I think blockchain is kind of already here. I think, we can keep talking about like, hey, we should have mass adoption, etc. But like the reality is blockchain is here. The technology is here. We have not just Near, obviously, there's a few other platforms that are easy to onboard, easy to use at scale, but actually starting to get integrated. And so it's less now about kind of innovation in technology, although there's obviously still work to do, but it's more around kind of just adopting, kind of figuring out regulatory side and actually getting it linked up with the rest of the kind of our traditional system.
Hello and welcome to the Protocol Podcast. I'm Brad Keoun here with my co-hosts Margaux Nijkerk and Sam Kessler. We're excited to dive into today's show with the latest news and developments in technology behind crypto and blockchains. First, please do not forget to subscribe to our weekly newsletter, The Protocol, on CoinDesk.com, and let's dive right into it. We've got Illia Polosukhin, co-founder of Near Protocol, and he is also an AI expert. Previously worked at Google, right, Ilya?
Yeah, thanks for inviting. Great to be here.
Let's get right into our first question here. Ilya, I was watching a presentation where you talked about when you started Near, and I believe you were working on an AI project and you were having a hard time paying collaborators. Is that right? And so you decided to start a blockchain to try to figure out how to solve that problem. I'm curious, are you doing that?
Yeah, so the background actually, Near started as Near AI, as in AI's Near and singularity is Near. And we were teaching machines to code. So as you mentioned, my background is in, I worked at Google Research, working on deep learning, on machine learning. And I'm actually a author of the paper that introduced transformers, the technology that's used now in ChatGPT, in Midjourney, in Gemini, and all of this. And so I left Google because and I still believe that we are kind of at a precipice of a fundamental shift how we interact with computing, and AI will be a driver for that, and specifically AI that is able to write code. And so we started Near AI with this premise that, hey, we're going to teach machines to code. Now, this is 2017. This sounded like a science fiction. And we definitely were not super well-funded lab. So we did some interesting research, but what we're trying to do is find very interesting ways to acquire kind of labeled data for our machine learning models. And so we engaged students around the world, from China, from Eastern Europe, from kind of other countries, where it's usually computer science students. They didn't have a full-time job, and they were interested in doing small coding tasks for us for small amount of money. Now the challenge was it's students, so some of them didn't have bank accounts. Sending money from US to China to Eastern Europe is actually cumbersome, complicated, and sometimes just doesn't work. Like PayPal didn't work in China, TransferWise didn't work in Ukraine, and so on and so on. And so one of the people we were working with was like, hey, you just send me in Bitcoin. And that kind of started us diving into it, because we looked at Bitcoin and it's like, hey, we're sending you $3, it costs us $5 in fees. That's kind of strange. And so, you start digging in. And so Ethereum and Bitcoin, this is like 2018 already, we're still, transaction fees were too high for kind of this micropayments that we were doing. And, we went through all of the protocols that existed at the time, as well as the one that we're building, and none of them really matched what we were expecting from global payment network that can handle billions of users, that allows people to onboard and use it without buying crypto first. So kind of what you expect from a payment system. And so that's where Near Protocol started, is, hey, we can address this problem that we have ourselves, and kind of build this more programmable environment that is easy to use, that actually can handle and scale to billions of users. So obviously, fast forwarding, right, we launched it in 2020. We have, Near right now is the most used by active users on chain. I think today I saw something like 17 million monthly actives. over 3 million daily actives now. At the same time, we have quite a few actually projects doing that, crowdsourcing on Near to really label data. And they are kind of designed for different challenges, but indeed engaging to collect training data for AI. And the benefit is, compared to something like Web 2 alternatives like Scale AI, they are probably over 10 times cheaper because they don't have any staff. It's just a smart contract. There's no kind of employment contract. There's no kind of onboarding process. There's no kind of system. All of this is in game kind of game mechanics that's built around smart contract. And so one of this called kind of Nijkerk is operating without any employees whatsoever, just kind of being like a system that facilitates people who want to do the job and people who want to provide tasks and kind of pay for it.
I was reading a blog post that in May where you wrote, quote, AI is clearly becoming the most disruptive technology of the next decade. And I think it's, for somebody who's working in blockchain, because a lot of people say that about blockchain, right? But you think AI is more disruptive than blockchain?
Well, yes, but also I think blockchain is kind of already here. I think we can keep talking about like, hey, we should have mass adoption, etc. But like the reality is, blockchain is here. The technology is here. We have not just Near. Obviously, there's a few other platforms that are easy to onboard, easy to use at scale. They're actually starting to get integrated, and so it's less now about kind of innovation in technology, although there's obviously still work to do. But it's more around kind of in a way, tide just turning around, just adopting, kind of figuring out regulatory side and actually getting it linked up with the rest of the kind of our traditional systems, right? So I can buy stuff on e-commerce website with crypto. And so that's not a technological problem. Like the current limitations of blockchain are not anymore technological problems. They're literally just, regulatory and kind of business development. And we see that kind of with partners we're working with, a lot of them are just kind of coming up with this. With AI, we are in a very different position where we literally have few companies that have a massive head start and a massive proprietary flywheel that benefits them to generate more revenue by actually extracting kind of value from the users, right? Like all of them are training user attention, which is limited. They already have massive distribution, right? They already have kind of all of the potential users they can attract. They already are on their platform. And so the only way to grow your revenue is actually get them to spend more time on your platform. So a lot of the efforts, even if it's not by design of like some single person, by nature of incentives, it's kind of designed to continue keeping people in the platform and creating that flywheel of more revenue, better model that is better at keeping people on the platform to make more money. And so I think we're kind of in a very I would say thin situation where we can fall into like a very much like a Black Mirror episode where few companies control not just our kind of what we spend our leisure time, but pretty much everything in our life, because it kind of captured all of our attention. And if that happens, actually Web3 is gone, because you don't actually need Web3 if you go to one company for all of your needs for everything, including payments, including all your data sits with them, all the payments sit with them, all the we kind of give up all of everything we could own to these platforms. And so that's why fundamentally like user-owned AI is really important. Kind of that's what I introduced in that post.
So we'll talk, I'm sure, plenty during this segment about what Near is building. You brought up that comparison to scale, and I'm hoping we have time to get into that. But you mentioned how when you were at Google, you are one of the co-authors of this, really important paper about transformers, upon which a lot of these models that we see today have been built. One of the few people, this actually came up explicitly, your name in a conversation that I had at East Denver. You're one of the few people in crypto who actually does have credibility, like, that we can point at these papers about, when it comes to this topic of AI. But you also have tons of crypto companies, both new companies and incumbents that are jumping onto the AI train in various different ways. To start out, I wonder if at like a high survey level, you can kind of give me your sense of whether these all of these different endeavors that we're seeing in crypto and AI at this intersection make sense to you? I know that's a broad question. You can get specific, but how are you viewing this?
Yeah, I actually posted kind of my user-owned AI stack, which is also what we're working on when we're incubating and partnering with projects. And it's really about, like, if you take kind of one of the centralized companies and open it up and see what's inside, right? You kind of need to replicate a lot of those pieces and then, put them together in the right way so that we have an alternative and ideally better solution, and better like in multiple different characteristics, right? So what are those layers? Well, there's a data layer, right? These models are trained on data, as well as you need fresh data, you need kind of up-to-date news, you need fresh content, Twitter, etc., to be able to kind of answer questions about what's going on right now, provide you context, etc. You need we see a move to, for example, synthetic data, right? Because we kind of, although today there's a paper that introduced 260 trillion token data set, which I haven't looked yet where that came from. But in general, we're kind of running out of already existing data on the internet. And so what now is needed is actually generating data for either specific problems or kind of more broadly to then train this and fine tune these models. So you need a synthetic data marketplace. Again, this can be like a team inside Google that is doing that, or you can have a project that is actually putting that together and offering it as a service.
There's a lot of different companies, projects, protocols that are kind of coming at this space. The idea of aggregating, filtering, providing this data, labeling it, and so on is the problem that you're trying to tackle. There's also companies that are trying to train models on chain. There are, protocols that are trying to figure out the problem of data provenance. Whether this was developed by an AI or whether this AI model was trained on data that's in the public domain or belongs to some company or individual, and so on and so forth. I wonder if there are other kind of, maybe if we could get specific, other protocols that you're looking at that you think are exciting in this space, or, is your sentiment that this specific coordination problem that it sounds like you're trying to solve is the one that blockchain is tuned for, and the rest of this stuff is kind of just like noise? Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, so I was going through the stack. So the layer one was data. The second one is infrastructure, and the third one is applications, right? And so the infrastructure, that's where things get complicated, because a lot of infrastructure benefits from being co-located and being centralized. It's actually really expensive to run. B100 is going to cost, or B200 is going to cost $5 million. This is not your retail, plug in my computer and start mining type thing. And so
you're talking about the infrastructure, sorry, just to clarify, that is used to train AI models.
Train and do inference.
Processing power.
Yeah. And so what we expect there, I mean, there's a lot of projects, like anything that says we're doing training on chain, you can kind of put this aside. Pretty much anything where you actually have a consensus in the middle of the AI process. The AI itself is already slow and expensive, right? Like if you have on top of it consensus, that means you have 20, 30, 100 machines doing the same work, right? Yeah. That's way too expensive. And there's very little use cases that require that kind of level of verification.
But there are protocols that are trying to do that, that you're alluding to. Plenty that state that they're trying to do that.
Yeah, there's ZK proofs, which are really interesting technology, very important long-term. But again, right now, kind of shorter term, it's too expensive. And so the only ways where it's useful is where you're moving a lot of money because of AI inference.
Sure.
And that's when you do need a proof, right? So this is where the amount of use cases right now and kind of technology. Now, it's still worth investing in that kind of on R&D side and bringing that technology kind of into open source for them to be able to monetize. But that is more R&D. So this is computing infrastructure is really depends, and very you need to get very nuanced about how things are working. And there are projects that are doing, a good balance between how do we leverage decentralization to coordinate kind of more resources, compute resources included, while still providing competitive and comparable performance to centralized providers.
I want to pivot to, this has been fascinating listening to you talk about AI, given, your prominence sort of in some of these new innovations. But I do want to pivot a little bit back to blockchain and to Near, and specifically to, in the fall, I was covering a lot about data availability, and you guys came out with Near DA. I want to briefly, maybe you can explain to our listeners what Near DA is and what's the status of it. Like, where have things been since the announcement? I think it was back in November at NearCon. Just give us an update.
Yeah, so data availability is this problem that as, we're scaling transaction processing, we kind of adding more different pretty much participants in the network who are processing and are kind of this nodes, right? So usually it's considered layer twos, but even on Near itself, right, we have shards. The data availability is like the way to ensure that all of the transactions are indeed available and somebody else can go and reconstruct the state of the blockchain. So it's extremely important, kind of fundamental piece of the system. Now, in this kind of modular architecture where, Ethereum moved with layer twos, the data availability plays like a crucial role that if that sequencer goes down, right, anybody can be able to go to and replay the kind of transactions and reconstruct the state and be able to exit, as well as if it's an optimistic rollup or ZK, they need to prove that they executed some set of transactions, or you need the fraud proof. You need to have kind of these transactions available for somebody to validate. So fundamental piece, Near blockchain itself design contained data availability. We designed it from 2019 because, fundamentally Near's sharding design is kind of uses that component kind of under the hood. And so when we saw a demand for data availability from kind of new rollups, one of our kind of folks on our team said like, hey, why don't we like package this as a product, right? And offer it. And so, so it was announced in November. There's kind of few layer twos already on mainnet, few more building. I think one of the top 15 layer twos actually using it, RSS3. It's also AI layer 2 as well. And what happened is like this itself is kind of a project and product in itself. There's other products for modularity that Near can provide. So we have fast finality gadget with EigenLayer. And so all of this and the team that kind of came up with this idea and built it actually spun off as a separate company called Nuffle Labs. And they are now kind of this Near modularity provider for the Ethereum ecosystem and kind of beyond. And they're working independently. They raised kind of around $13 million from kind of Electric, Fabric, Canonical, and a few other VCs. And so they're now operating kind of as one of the nodes in the ecosystem.
Oh, okay, sweet. So, but the core of the product is still called Near DA, right? Or is it?
Yeah. So they have now? Near DA. They have kind of Near fast finality, and they are working on more products. So it's kind of like a package of products that you can use to make your layer 2 faster, cheaper. So right. RSS3, when they switched to Near DA, they actually went from paying thousands of dollars a day to paying $3 a day. So that's kind of to give you the idea on the cost reduction.
Is there a difference though between, if a builder wants to use a Near DA versus like a Celestia or Avail? I'm just thinking of names in my head. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously the team is way more equipped to do this. You should get them here. But, I mean, Near DA right now, at least, is cheaper than Celestia and Avail. Mm-hmm. As well as because Near itself is sharded, kind of with each new shard, we actually add more data availability capacity to the network. So we already right now at 6 shards, each shard is 4 megabytes per second, so it's 24 megabytes per second, but we can add more capacity as well. So that's kind of more like, I would say like hard numbers that people are dealing with. But on a more kind of longer term trajectory, the benefit is actually connecting to Near ecosystem and chain abstractions that we're building. And maybe that's as a segue.
Yeah, why don't you tell our listeners about chain abstraction?
Yeah. So the idea that Near actually started with this idea in mind, it just was very, very Near focused, is if we want to onboard 1 billion users, right, 1 billionth user will not know about blockchains, right? They will not need to think about it. They will not want to think about it. They will just want to use the product they got onboarded with, maybe send money, maybe interact, maybe watch a movie, whatever those Web3 applications are going to be. And to achieve that, and again, this was coming from our original, like, how do we build crowdsourcing, data labeling platform? It should not be that you need to like sign up, install a wallet, fund it with some coin first before you can use anything, right? Especially if you're coming to actually earn something, like you need to fund it. It's kind of strange. And so we designed a lot of things for Near itself to make it really easy to onboard new users. We have meta transactions natively, so you can pay applications can pay transaction fees on behalf of users. We have native account abstraction, which allows to have multiple different access keys to your account with different permissions, and so on, right? There's a lot of kind of thought went into that design. And because of this, Near has most users in Web3 is because it's so easy for Web2 applications to just integrate Near kind of on the back end and abstract the chain for their users. Now, back in end of 22, we kind of realized that although Near has an ecosystem, it's not going to be the whole Web3 ecosystem, right? We're not going to it's not a winner takes all market. And so instead of doing this zero-sum competition, what if we actually bring the same thought process and the same tooling we already built to everyone in all Web3 chains? And that's kind of where chain abstraction was born. How do we bring kind of this idea that users can come in, use any application across Web3, not need to think about the transaction fees on that chain, don't need to think about which chain that is. Ideally shouldn't worry about like, hey, that chain stalls, etc. Like, I need to figure out what to do. Like, all of that ideally should be abstracted, and they have a simple interface they can navigate with. And so that's kind of the core thesis of chain abstraction. And there's a lot of technologies that needs to go into it, right? It's not just Near. A lot of people building different pieces of this, and we kind of build the movement around that. But what specifically Near has is this ability for a Near account to transact on other chains. And so in a way, we call them like remote accounts. You have kind of your Near account that you manage, and then that Near account has kind of control of accounts on different chains. And those accounts don't have kind of associated private key. The private key is kind of managed by Near network itself and by MPC network we have. And so through that, you can now pretty much, you log in, you open an app that is, for example, Ethereum or Solana. You log in with your Near wallet, and you can use it because it will just create a Solana transaction, sign it through your Near account, and send it on Solana and pay Solana fee there while charging you on Near. So that's kind of the core mechanism that we built. And so now we launched some preview. We have a hot wallet, which has over 12 million users now. They just launched Base integration kind of through their own kind of version of chain signatures. They already brought like 400,000 users to Base from their user base. And then we expect a lot more applications like this that are going to be built that are either abstracting for the user or actually abstracting for the smart contracts, because you can actually have smart contracts to do the same thing because they're just Near accounts, and do multi-chain dexes, multi-chain lending, where you have, maybe you have Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Solana. You put that and you borrow USDT on Base, right? And so that all managed by one kind of lending protocol across all chains. So those are just examples, kind of all this coming together.
Yeah, we got to wrap it, Ilya. It's super interesting. It seems like Near, you've really embraced this idea of finding purposes, right, and use cases and things to do, rather than just kind of being your own ecosystem. Is that fair?
I would say, we are driven by solving real problems, right? Yeah. And like whatever we need to bring to the ecosystem to solve those problems, right? The Near protocol at the core, right, is staying the same. It's a highly scalable platform that's available, that's is generic, but we see those challenges that people having, and we're bringing together resources and kind of teams and efforts to really solve them and kind of move forward the whole space, both kind of in Web3 and in AI, to really bring this user-owned internet, user-owned AI, and user-owned kind of access data forward. And that's kind of been our vision from the beginning.
Thank you so much, Ilya. It's been great having you on. We want you back for a deeper discussion on other related stuff, but really appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for inviting.
All right, well, that is a wrap for this week's The Protocol podcast. Thank you for listening. Thanks to our producer, Michelle Musso, and our booker, Mel Montañez. If you have any questions about any stories or comments, please reach out to us at podcasts@coindesk.com, subject line The Protocol. You can listen to us weekly on CoinDesk Podcast Network or wherever you get your podcasts. Also, please subscribe to our weekly newsletter, The Protocol, on coindesk.com. Thanks, and see you next week.